it again. And frankly, if you've only watched it once or twice, you might want to watch it more. It's really something. I have to say that, when I set out making these lists of movies to show, I mean, part of it was things that I thought were historically significant, and others are things that I just think are terrific. And this is one that falls in the latter category. I think this is really a remarkable film document. Actually, it's really something. I need to change my name on the screen.
Right, you go ahead. I'll change your name.
Okay, thank you. So, so this is Enemies: A Love Story from 1989. It's directed by Paul Mazursky, who made a lot of movies in his career. He died in 2014. Made a lot of movies with some Jewish content in them. Some are more explicitly Jewish than others, but most of his movies, similar to someone like Woody Allen, say, where it doesn't always, the movie isn't always all about Jews and Judaism, but there's always a lot of Jews around whenever he's making a movie, right? So Paul Mazursky plays a small part in this movie. He actually, and he acted in a number of things even before he became a director, and played small parts in a number of his movies. But he plays Masha's husband, Leon Torchiner, in this movie. So he's got just that one scene on the boardwalk in Coney Island, but it's a pretty pivotal scene actually that he played in, and he was quite good as an actor, but became better known as a screenwriter and director. So most of his movies, he was at least the co-screenwriter, if not the only screenwriter, and that was the case in this movie. He wrote the screenplay along with, let's see, do I have that name? Roger Simon. And they were nominated for an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. The movie's adapted from a novel by Isaac Bashevis Singer, the same person who wrote the short story that becomes Yentl. And if you remember, Singer was not happy with Barbra Streisand's Yentl. This was a few years later, and Paul Mazursky met with him, and Singer was unhappy about how his work had been translated to the screen, and Mazursky assured him there would be no songs. Right? That he was not going to turn Enemies: A Love Story into a musical. That said, there's a lot of music in the movie. The score itself, which sounds like klezmer songs that you've heard over and over again, is actually a new score on klezmer themes. It's written by a Jewish composer whose name escapes me for the moment, but I'll get back to it. Oh gosh. So did anyone catch it? I have Maurice Jarre. That's it, Maurice Jarre. So
he also wrote the score for Witness, the movie Witness, with Harrison Ford, and that was a stellar score.
Right. He's a terrific composer, actually, and I think he's got either a brother or a father who's also a composer, Alfred Jarre. So there's Maurice and Alfred. So Paul Mazursky got Isaac Bashevis Singer's permission to make the film. Story is that he actually brought photos of the different actors and actresses that he planned to cast in the movie, and Singer saw them and saw the story come to life in his head while Mazursky was talking to him. So they were nominated, as I said, for an Oscar for the screenplay. Lena Olin and Angelica Houston were also both nominated for this movie for Best Supporting Actress. Neither of them won. I think that was the year that Brenda Fricker won for My Left Foot. Oh. And perhaps it's usually the case when two actors or actresses from the same film are nominated in the same category, they kind of split the vote. And so sometimes it goes to neither of them. And that possibly happened in this case, but these are terrific performances all around. Ron Silver, who is Herman, is a good actor who I think that this is his biggest and probably most compelling role, actually. But he was in a number of things. Not all of the cast is Jewish, of course. Paul Mazursky is Jewish. He was born in Brooklyn. His original name was Erwin Mazursky, but when he became an actor, for some reason, he changed only his first name to Paul. And Ron Silver, who's passed away actually as well, was Jewish. He was born in New York City. His dad was in the garment industry, and his mom was a teacher. And he actually was a teacher. He taught at a Jewish boarding school in New Jersey before he ever really made it as an actor. He taught languages and was actually a linguistic scholar of some renown. He spoke fluent Chinese, among other things. But also in the cast, I'm sure that you all recognized Alan King, who was sometimes called the Jewish Will Rogers for his storytelling, and many appearances, of course, on the Ed Sullivan Show and the Tonight Show, and in nightclubs and things like that, and does a pretty effective job as an actor. He's in other movies as well, but he was also born in New York City, the youngest of 8 children in his Jewish family. His real name was also Erwin, actually, like Paul Mazursky, Erwin Nyberg, Kniberg. So he kind of kept some of those letters, rearranged them a little bit, and became Alan King. He plays Rabbi Lembeck, of course, in this movie, and got a few extra Alan Kings in there in your pictures there, Vanessa. So the other,
he is pretty recognizable, but I can only, some of these are not. It's a common name.
I noticed there were a couple, other Alan Kings around.
Yes.
Yeah. So the 3 women, none of the actresses are Jewish. Angelica Houston, of course, is the daughter of the great director and actor John Huston, the niece of Walter Huston. She was nominated for this movie. She won her Oscar for Prizzi's Honor a couple of years before this movie. And she was also nominated for her role in The Grifters, I think a couple of years after this movie, with Annette Bening. Lena Olin was born in Sweden in 1955. And she made her American screen debut, I think, in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, and then appeared later in the movie Chocolat as well. But is really terrific as Masha in this movie. Margaret Sophie Stein has not appeared in many movies in America. She actually is a Polish actress. She acts under her Polish name in Poland. She did appear in the Woody Allen movie Bullets Over Broadway in a relatively small part. But there's only a few screen roles for her in America with an Americanized name, Margaret Sophie Stein. So that's the cast. And the book was written in Yiddish in 1966 because of course Isaac Bashevis Singer wrote all his work in Yiddish. It was translated into English in 1972, and it's the first novel of Singer's that actually takes place in America. It's the first one that isn't set in the old world, right? Mm. So pretty. He wrote several more in America after that, but this was the first. So the movie has the classic makings of a farce. A man with 3 wives in 3 different neighborhoods and the running back and forth between them. and it plays in many ways like a farce, doors opening and closing, unexpected encounters. I mean, all of those kinds of things. But the comedy here, of course, is much darker than your typical farce would be, right? And that doesn't mean it's without humor. There are certainly elements of humor that kind of run throughout the movie. Some of it's pretty dark. Some of it's farce-like in its way. The elderly gentleman who appears in the last third of the film, the guy who comes to the apartment in Coney Island to meet Herman and to meet his wife, the Polish peasant who's converted to Judaism, right? And then runs into him later at Rabbi Lembeck's party. This is sort of the classic element of farce. And there are a couple of lines that he has about, you immigrants have it over us Americans. We only have our wives one at a time, right? Things like that. So we do have those kinds of lines in the movie. A kind of a personal favorite, both it sort of gets the tone of the movie for me, is when he's having a fight with Jadwiga and she's finally kind of figured out what's going on, and she yells at him, "There is no jungle in Baltimore," right? And it is funny and it's anguished at the same time, right? And that's the tone of this movie. But there's a humor and there's a pain that runs throughout it. These characters are deeply, fully human in a sense, and this is I would say a characteristic of the work of I.B. Singer, and it matches well with the work of Paul Mazursky. And one of the things I think this movie and the book set out to do is, there are a lot of movies that are about the Holocaust, about survivors. We're going to watch another one next week, The Pawnbroker, about a survivor. And sometimes those movies tend towards making saints out of those survivors, right? Even a movie, you may remember The Pianist, which I just recently rewatched because it happened to be on cable a week or so ago, directed by Roman Polanski. And this beleaguered Jewish pianist is certainly human, but he's also rises above in a sense, right? And this movie, none of these people are saints. Except maybe Jadwiga, right? But they are Holocaust survivors are people too, right? And some of the same things that they were before the war is still there. And certainly the effects of the Holocaust on them have perhaps changed them. The question you can ask is, how much do humans really change even after such circumstances? The scene where he's reunited with Tamara is a good example. After the initial shock that they are that she's still alive, they're back to bickering and fighting like they did before the war ever started, right? In much the same way that they did then. So I think this movie is in part just making the case for the full set of human emotions for all of these people. There's no question that the character of Herman and the others have the Holocaust indelibly printed on them. There are several moments in the film, and we'll see something similar in The Pawnbroker next week, but where he's in one place but imagining another, that he is in
Okay.
he's in bed in Coney Island,
We have the video on.
and he's back in the back also in the barn in Poland, right? That's in the opening scenes of the movie. Later on, it happens again, I think, when he's at the Catskills and he has a fight with Masha and he goes out by himself by the water. And again, he hears the sounds and imagines what happened to him during the war. It happens a third time, I think, when he's leaving Rabbi Lembeck's party after kind of being exposed on all different fronts, right? So, so the past is not gone when it comes to him. We have other characters who talk about it, right? So Tamara tells him after the one night that they actually spend together, once she comes back, that that she sees the faces of their children before her. You know, it's kept her from behaving the way some other people behaved in Russia, right? And we even hear it from Jadwiga, who talks about, you know, what she did for him during the war. It's more to reproach him. I think I don't remember if this was in the Shabbat scene or the Yom Kippur scene, where she talks about how she gave him the last morsel of food from her mouth, and you know, saved his life, right? Which you know, so all of those characters, and in fact, Masha, the first thing we see of Masha is the number on her arm before the camera pulls back and we see her in full. Right? So the characters, all of them, all of the main characters, I think, perhaps except for Jadwiga, talk about being dead. Right? This is a recurring verbal motif in the movie, right? You know, that whether it's saying, you know, Masha saying, why wasn't I cremated along with the others? You know, Herman saying, I might be better off dead, but you know, that would require a decision, essentially, right? You know, so there's all of those, and then of course the story of Tamara, who I have no reason to think that Herman didn't believe that she was dead, that he hadn't been told that she was dead, you know, and so never expected her to show up. And again, in a scene that is sort of borrowed from farce, right? When Tamara comes to Coney Island for the first time and knocks on the door, and Jadwiga opens the door and sees a ghost. You know, don't open the door, there's a ghost there, she says to Herman, right? You know, there's a few other lines in that scene where, you know, where Tamara refers to having come back from the dead, right? Or being dead. So it's, we see that all through the movie, you know. We also have these distinct neighborhoods which the movie takes place in, which I think is an interesting thing about it. So we've got Coney Island in Brooklyn, we've got the Bronx, and we've got Manhattan. And we've got Manhattan on the Upper West Side, where Rabbi Lembeck lives, and we've got the Lower East Side, where Tamara is staying with a relative when she comes back. So we get to see all
the Catskills.
Oh yeah, we also get a trip to the Catskills, you know. So and I think that again, as in some of the other movies we've seen, there's a really this is terrific scene design and set direction. I mean, most of it filmed on location, but making it appear to be the Lower East Side of 1949. You know, this is not a high budget movie. I mean, they didn't spend a ton of money on sets and things like that, but they scouted the neighborhoods. And so there's a couple of blocks on the Lower East Side that even now look like the old Jewish Lower East Side. And this movie scouted out those locations and used them very effectively. I would point to the first image, I think, in the movie is of the Ferris wheel, if I'm not mistaken. Is it the very first image? You remember? This is a movie, we've talked about credit sequences. This is a movie without a credit sequence. No, the first scenes are the scenes in the barn. right? You have the klezmer music, and then as that music is replaced by the sounds of a woman screaming and the sound of the dogs and the soldiers, right? And then Herman wakes up from that dream to see that he's in Coney Island in 1949, and sees and we see the Ferris wheel outside. There's a recurring image of the Ferris wheel and the other rides at Coney Island, and also train tracks, right? And I think I don't know if the train tracks are meant to evoke Auschwitz and the train lines that ran there, as much as they're to evoke kind of a sense of Herman is like the Ferris wheel. He's going round in circles. He's, just, there's no way out for him. It's just round and round, constantly on the train from one neighborhood to another. There's a scene where you see the subway sign, right? It's Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and he's got to stand there and figure out which of those he's going to. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful shot in the movie that's very evocative of showing us the thought in the character's head, right? So, so he says things like, maybe I'm no longer a part of this world. He says that to Rabbi, I think he says that to Rabbi Lembeck. And Lembeck says back to him, I know lots of concentration camp survivors. They have cars, they work, they have telephones. And he says, maybe that's my problem. I was hiding in a barn. Right? So his singular experience of the Holocaust is also different. So, I'd love to hear some thoughts from you guys, and I have plenty more to talk about. I do think this is a very complicated text, and you could talk about it a lot, but just any thoughts? Anybody have any questions or things you want to bring up?
Shoshana?
Just a moment, go ahead. I claim that the predicament that Herman was in was a result of the Holocaust, although it looks like a farce.
Yeah.
But he was in the polygamy situation because of the Holocaust. The first wife, he married Jadwiga. She saved him, and she loved him, and he could not say no. He could not make decisions, but he could not say no. Mm-hmm. She wanted, so he married her. She did him a favor. She saved his life. At that time, he was not married. He was married, but his wife, he thought, was killed. So he was not married in his thought. The second wife, and he brought her to the United States. In the United States, he really fell in love. His real life was Masha. His real love was Masha. And they even agreed together to commit suicide, die together. And she knew about Jadwiga and why he married her. Anyway, and then appears his first wife, and he did not know that she was alive. And here he is, and she diagnosed him very well, and she said, you cannot make decisions, I'll make the decisions for you. If it was not for the Holocaust, he would not have been a polygamist.
I think yes and no, right? So he might not have been a polygamist. He might not have been married 3 times, but there's no question that that Tamara thinks that he was unfaithful even before the war, right? So he is a serial adulterer.
Yes.
but he wouldn't necessarily have wound up with 3 wives. I think that's right. Yeah.
And he couldn't make a decision at the end. And at the end, she told him not to leave a child. So what did he do? He went to Miami. Why do I say he went to Miami? Because I listened to the Mazursky talking about the film, and he said that he really went to, in the book, he went to Miami, and he
Yeah.
was sending $20 to his
Right.
to Yadviga to take care of the child. He was not present, but he sent $20. Yes.
Right. So which we see the $20 near the end of the movie. You're right. The movie doesn't specify where he is, but he's gone. We can assume that perhaps he took one of these jobs that Rabbi Lembeck was offering to him and to Masha, but we don't know that for sure. Of course, the interesting thing in that final scene is we have 3 women in an apartment together. They are Tamara and Yadviga, and the baby is named Masha, right? So his 3 wives, in a sense, are all together again, right? And they're now living together, and so it's a nice piece of symmetry. I saw Alice's hand.
Yeah,
Right, and
yeah.
Alice and then Marcia Rosenbaum.
yeah, yes, he was a polygamist, but I think you can also look at it as basically showing that the 3 women gave him different aspects of a wife. And obviously Masha was the passion and, the love of his life, the passion. Yadviga was, besides saving his life, she also was so earnest about, converting to Judaism and keeping him really kind of, being Jewish, maybe when he wanted to stray, I love that scene where on Shabbos, where I forgot what he's so upset and he goes and he turns on the light and she tells him, no, you can't turn on the light. I just thought that was great. And then of course, Tamara, his first wife, they had children together, even though they were squabbling, but it was, kind of a normal marriage. And then, they had their lives in Europe and they were raising children together. So I think, the 3 women, they each, I don't know, to me, it was like they each gave him different things.
I think there's a lot to that, but each of them is fully human in her own way,
Yes.
too, right? They're I mean, you might argue that Masha is missing something, that, I mean, she's lost a lot. I mean, she's so damaged by her experience in Auschwitz.
I don't disagree with that. I just think it just, maybe that's why he's so indecisive, because it's like, they all gave him a lot, but it's like, so how do you decide between the 3 of them?
Right. So, and once you find, you sound very sympathetic to his point of view. Once you get yourself in that position, how do you extricate yourself without hurting people, right?
Exactly.
Which in some ways he didn't want to do, right? As crazy as that may seem, he didn't want to hurt them.
Right.
No.
All right, we have Marcia and then Suzanne.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I almost think Tamar was the love of his life. She knew him. They were best friends. And I think marriages are the most successful when you're friends first. And they did have the children together and they had that grief together. And I agree that Masha was his passion. And I think he was beholden to Adviga because she saved his life, but she also was the homemaker. But I just want to say something on a personal note, and I have to thank Rabbi for recommending this film. I grew up in the Catskills, and my dad grew up in the Bronx, and we used to go there all the time to visit Tante Katie. And when he had a rare Sunday off from his dry goods store, we used to go to Coney Island, and then he used to do shopping for his dry goods store in the Lower East Side and treat us to lunch. So I have to say on a personal note, oh, and my Yiddish name is Masha, and my grandma used to call me, my paternal grandma used to call me Mashallah. So I was like, it was so emotional for me because it was kind of like I'd lived a lot of that experience, but my grandparents didn't escape the Holocaust. They luckily came here at the turn of the century, like so many Jews, to escape the czars. So anyway, it just was the whole thing was very personal. Of course, some of it I laughed out loud, except at the end when I was devastated and I couldn't get rid of the lump in my throat. But I think mashallah was the hope. And so that was like very uplifting at the end.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
So-
think so. There's a kind of a happy ending here.
in a sense.
Yeah.
Suzanne,
Yes, I thought that the husband was a very weak character, and they must have had a very good life in Europe because Jadwiga was their servant. And I think Tamara was a strong woman who ran the house. They had two beautiful children, and their lives were turned upside down. They were all broken from the Holocaust. But it seemed Tamara could just, her strength, she was able to move forward. I think he was just a weak character. You could see it even in the first scene. He's watching Jadwiga be beaten up, and you could see the fear in his face that he was going to be caught. But the one thing I didn't understand, here Masha was constantly fighting with her mother, and yet when her mother died, her most important idea was to be buried next to her mother.
Yeah. Well, she says, I don't want to be buried next to strangers. And he says, you'll be buried next to me. And she says, you are a stranger.
Yeah.
You know, this is human, it seems to me, right? You know, what's that the devil, you know, right? So the person you fight with all the time, but she's still your mother, you know? So,
yeah, Elaine wants to know your thoughts on the title. Who are the enemies?
right. Well, the place where the movie says something explicitly about that is pretty close to the end when he's having a cup of tea after leaving Rabbi Lembeck's party. I think that's the placement with Tamara, and you know, he's talking about Masha as his lover, and she's not your lover, she's your enemy, right? You know, this is the scene where she asks to be his manager. So so I think the movie kind of makes explicit there that that love for Masha, you know, well, I mean, it's a love that nearly takes him after surviving, you know, in the barn in the Holocaust, it nearly takes him to suicide, right? So so there's a sense there that, yeah, she's passion, she's love, there's no question, but she is also the enemy, right? So I think it may be more complicated than that, but that's the kind of obvious answer that the movie gives. I think that the broader answer might be what we were just talking about Masha and her relationship with her mother. That the people we love are sometimes, you know, the relationships are not smooth, right? Does he love Tamara? I mean, did he love her before the war? Probably, yeah. You know, I mean, he's more honest with her than anybody else in the movie, right? She's the only one who knows about both of these other women and understands what he's doing. So and yet, you know, what do? They fight, right? So I think there's this idea, and I think it you know, it may ring familiar for some of us in some ways, right? That who can you fight with except the people you love, right? You know, my parents had the same fight for 40 years. You know, it was about what time dinner was going to be, right? And you know, I mean, it's a, you know, they loved each other deeply. They were married for 66 years till my mother died. You know, but that was, you know, all of my father's working life until he retired. That was a debate, you know, so.
Brenda wants to know, did Herman commit suicide with Masha or did he survive?
He survives because he's sending $20 a week in the mail, you know. So I think when there's a line where she's you know, he asks her to be honest, and she says, let's see, what you did with your wife, I did with my husband. And
Right. Okay.
and for him, that kind of breaks the spell.
Yeah.
There's this moment where they're about to do it. They're, you know, and it kind of breaks the spell because he says, you know, we are not as passionate about each other as I thought we were. Right? There's no need to commit suicide now.
Right.
Right.
And besides, that's kind of against Judaism, you know.
Right. And I think that's what he means there. There's a line there when she says to him something about being afraid, and he says, I am afraid. I'm afraid of God. Right.
Right.
And I think one of the things he's referring to there is that he is a learned Jewish man. Right. There's a line that I find very humorous earlier. It says, the Talmud is such a good book. Why doesn't it tell me anything about a man with 2 wives? Right? But so he knows these texts and understands that one thing he's not supposed to do is kill himself.
Right.
He says more than once he'd be better off dead. And that when Masha's mother dies, he says she's lucky she doesn't have to make decisions anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, the you know, the hardest thing for him, as we know, I mean, like a Yiddish Hamlet, right? Making a decision is really hard. I see there's some hands up and stuff. Vanessa, I didn't see you.
Oh, sorry, Julie. Julie, go ahead. You need to unmute.
I was just going to comment on the title. I'm thinking that the 3 wives, each one of them in a way was an enemy. Enemy's a love story. Love and because with having each wife complicated his life so much. And even though he wasn't ready to shed them, they really were the bane of his life. They were even in a way enemies to each other to some extent that anyhow, I can't explain that any differently, but that's a thought I have. But what I want to ask is, what did Herman do to make a living? And second, because it seemed they spent all of his time going between from one wife to another. Yeah. And also, I'd like to ask Rabbi Ike to comment on your colleague, Rabbi Lembeck.
Yeah, Rabbi Lembeck. I actually think in the end, Rabbi Lembeck comes off pretty well. As you know, I mean, you start out thinking, well, is he? So to answer the question, what Herman does for a living, he's a ghostwriter. We should emphasize the word ghost there. Right. So he's writing Rabbi Lembeck's books and his lectures. Right. So you start out by thinking, well, who's this Rabbi Lembeck? You know, I mean, he doesn't even write his own sermons and things like that. You know, I'm not sure it was such an unusual practice for some of these more well-known, illustrious rabbis of New York in the 1940s and 50s to have some people a writing staff, let's say, to help get their point across. So that's what he does. You know, late in the movie, Rabbi Lembeck calls him and says, there's some mistakes in your article about the Kabbalah. You know, we need to talk about this and get it fixed before it goes to press tomorrow, right? So not sure if that means Rabbi Lembeck is learned enough to catch the mistakes, you know, but doesn't have time to write the articles. He's too busy managing 6 convalescent homes and, you know, remodeling his own apartment and a whole bunch of other things. So, but on the other hand, he's right there. You know, he's there in the scene in the maternity hospital where the movie goes. And again, someone talked about hope before, right? You see the scene of the 2 graves right next to each other Masha and her mother, and then cut to the maternity hospital, and there's Rabbi Lembeck, and he's provided all of the stuff for the baby and all of these things. So another sign perhaps that Herman is still working for Rabbi Lembeck. He's just working somewhere else. But I actually think in some ways the rabbi comes off okay. In terms of the saying that they're all enemies in a sense, you can ask yourself, would he be better off without them? And I think the answer to that is no, right? I mean, what we know is that when Herman is alone, he is back in the barn in Poland. When he's left alone he can't sleep. I mean, that's how he ends up sleeping once again with Tamara, is that, he says, if I was in your bed, I would sleep. And I think, again, do we take Philanderer at his word? I don't know. But the point is that when he's alone, he has those memories and they come back and haunt him. At least when he's with Masha, when he's with Tamara, and even to some extent with Jadwiga, he can hold those memories at bay, right? So I don't. You might argue he might be better with one rather than three, but the idea that he could do without them, I don't think that's right. I mean, I think he would have lost, at the very least, lost his mind, if not killed himself long before, right?
How would you comment on the title?
I'm sorry?
How would you comment on the title then?
Well, we talked about this, right? So the most obvious thing is what Tamara says to him near the end, that Masha is not his lover, she's your enemy, right? But it's, there's platitudes out there like we hurt the ones we love and those kinds of things. All of these relationships have their love and their hate in them, and that's a human experience, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think it describes all of the relationships in some way or another.
Brenda, go ahead.
I think it's interesting, and it's a nice ending that at the Ludwiga and Tamara are with Ludwiga's baby then at the end. So it's like for sure the two of them are at the very least amicable.
Yes, and she still calls her Mistress Tamara. Like, she's the mother of the baby, but she works for Tamara.
Right.
And they've named the baby after the third wife, right? Masha.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just, again, I mean, the elements of farce are here, but it's a farce that exists on a much deeper emotional level than farce does, right? Mm-hmm. The scene at Rabbi Lembeck's party when, who shows up, of course, but what's his name? Mr.
Pestilence or?
Yeah, I have it somewhere. Yeah, Mr. Pestilus.
Yeah.
Pestilus. So Mr. Pestilus knows everybody. Yeah, he does. Actually, in this movie, we have proof that Mr. Pestilus knows everybody. That's what Rabbi Lembeck says about him, and that actor, I've forgotten his name, but he just plays it very well, and you just see in his eyes as he's putting it all together, what's going on. So, very good.
He's in a ton of movies. He's very familiar, that guy. I'm going to look him up in a second. Suzanne wants to know, did Masha work?
It appears that she does, because she talks about being able to take vacation stuff. We don't know what her job is. We know that Herman lies about his job to Jadwiga. He's telling her that he's a book salesman, which is a great cover because she's illiterate, right? So while actually working for Rabbi Lembeck, and he's just using the traveling salesman thing so that he can be out of town. But it appears that Masha works. supports her and her mother. It's not clear, I don't think, in the movie what she does. Perhaps office work, who knows?
Specialist is Phil Leeds, and he has been, and it says the definition of a character actor, and he's been in a ton of things, a lot of television, and he
Right.
just, he's a great actor. He kind of, you know, he's part of an ensemble. Marcia, go ahead, Marcia Rosenbaum.
I was just going to say that she did work, because once when they were at her mother's house and Herman didn't want to leave, she said, "I'll be late for work." And
Right.
she was getting dressed and she said, "I'll be late for work." And her mom said, "Yeah, she'll be late for work." So
Yeah.
I don't know what that work was, but she definitely did have a job.
Right. Yeah, no,
Mm.
that's clear, I think. You know, besides, as I said, she says she gets to take vacation. So that's before they go off to the Catskills. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot to take apart in this movie and a lot to absorb. So, you know, it's Jadwiga still takes care of him, you know, as she did when she was a servant in the house, then when she was taking care of him in the barn. And now every time we go to, you know, every time the movie takes us into their apartment in Coney Island, she's ironing his shirts, she's mopping the floor. You know, he says to her in an early scene, "You're not the family servant anymore. You know, you're my wife." And she says, I'll run your bath," you know.
Yeah.
And see, she's bathing him while he reads the New York Times, right? So
The ironing scene, and I hate ironing, when she
Mhm.
spits the water on the shirt, because, you know, now you have irons that do that. I was like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
There are some, I know it is poignant, but when she thinks she sees a ghost, and she runs into the bathroom,
Right.
it's funny. It's that part of being a farce.
Yeah. And by the end of that scene, she's saying to her mistress, "Tamara, don't leave." Right. You know, she's the most sympathetic character, I think, in the movie, the most plaintive in a sense. She needs someone to take care of her, you know, and she gets it in the end. Mistress Tamara stays with her. And if she can't be Herman's agent, she can be Jadwiga's agent, right? And take care of Jadwiga and the
Even the
baby.
women on the street are sympathetic to her.
Right.
You know, look, you know, and kind of poo-pooing when he leaves and excited when she's pregnant, and
Right.
she's
Telling
a
her to get an
sympathetic
attorney,
character.
you know, she needs to learn about alimony, right?
Right.
Like that.
Forgot about that.
You know, all those things, right? So, so even that introduction where the neighbor comes and brings Mr. Pesciolus there, I think part of the idea is that this guy is wealthy and he can make their lives better, right? So the neighbor is looking out for her. So, so it's this story of these characters. No question that they're damaged by the Holocaust, but they're also who they are, and so I think they still do some of the things they do. I mean Jadwiga's an example, right? She can't help but be the servant. You know, that's who she is, right? You know, the people notice how aristocratic in a way Tamara is, right? Even after her story, you know, of her escape, right, is horrendous and shot into a mass grave. She talks about crawling over the bodies on a rainy night and getting to Russia, you know, and surviving the war that way. So so the three of them are each survivors, but each in their own way, right? I mean, you know, Herman survives by being kept in the barn. Masha survives Auschwitz, and Tamara escapes to Russia, you know, after being left for dead, shot twice and left for dead, you know. So they each have their own unique experience, in a sense, of surviving the Shoah, but they all do, right? And in the end, I guess Lena Olin's character doesn't survive, right? And it's not that unusual, unfortunately. We know of many cases of Holocaust survivors who committed suicide later on, right? For a variety of reasons, I think.
The famous authors, Primo Levi, Jerzy Kaczynski, you know, they write these. I've read a lot of Holocaust literature, and they've written these poignant, you know, beautiful books. And then to hear that they committed suicide is just like another death.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And there's a scene near the end where Masha's mother, you know, Masha has what I guess is called, I don't know if this is still the proper term for this, a hysterical pregnancy, right?
Oh, right.
She, thinks that she's pregnant, but she has a hemorrhage, and you know, but not a miscarriage. And her mother is upset. I wanted to be a grandmother. The doctor says don't worry, you'll be a grandmother within a year. And first she says, I won't be here in a year. I won't be alive in a year. And then she says, I really wanted a grandchild, if only to name for all the Jews who died in the Holocaust. So,
So when she says, I won't be around in a year, it was just like hearing my grandmother.
yeah,
Oh, I'll see you in August if I should only live so long to August. I mean, she always used to say stuff like that.
yeah. So it's yeah, I mean, so it's a very human kind of thing, and I think we all have, you know, it's a very Jewish thing, right? I mean, it's you know, I don't know how much time any of you spend talking to Orthodox Jewish people who, you know, salt and pepper their language with "God willing," right? I'll see you next month, God willing, right? I mean, that's it's ingrained in the conversation, you know.
They have it so, you know, if it's coming up, it's Mirz Hashem. And if it already happened, it's Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
So it's totally into their lingo. Everything they say, they've got
Right.
it covered.
And so it found its way into sort of immigrant speech, you know, in a sense, right? So of you know, many of us probably have relatives who had some of that.
Alice?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just from listening to our conversation, I feel this movie did such a good job of capturing real people. I mean, none of these people were just fake or just symbolic. I just think it did a really wonderful job of capturing real people living through the most horrendous thing possible, and then how they came out. But all through it, they were always people that had, you know, different aspects to their lives. And I think this movie does a really good job of capturing that. I think our conversation shows that.
Yeah, and like I said, this is one of those movies that I think rewards watching over and over. I mean, some movies, you know, watch them once, forget about it. You know, this movie, you know, first of all, every time I watch it again, I feel like I resonate to a different part of it. You know, so you know, it's so I find that there's always something new in this text when I look at it again. So I'm really pleased that I got a chance to watch it again with you guys. But there's so much talk. You know, we haven't even really touched the surface on the talk about God, right? Where was God? You know, if God could let this happen, you know, and so you have. You have Yadviga who wants to be Jewish, and maybe nobody else in the movie. I guess Rabbi Lembeck wants to be Jewish, but the other characters don't want to be Jewish. You know, not really, right? I mean, so, you know, when he turns on the light on Shabbat and she gets upset, he's, you know, if there's a God, he doesn't worry that I turned on the light, you know, which is good Reform Judaism, you know, which, you know, he's not, but you know, I'm sure Rabbi Lembeck, wherever he lives, turns on the lights, you know, right. But there's a brief moment in there where he returns to his Judaism, right? He's determined to stay away from Masha, and he's got the talit over his head, and he's studying, and you know, they're gonna do everything right. It doesn't last very long, but there's a moment where that comes back. But there's this sense. So where is God in this story? There's a kind of a, I'm not even sure exactly what to make of it near the end. I mean, it's one of his last encounters, if not the last, with Masha, where he talks about, she talks about Rabbi Lembeck has been an angel to her, and he says Tamara is an angel, and says we should get these two angels together. Maybe they'll make a new God, right? And then she says to him, "We're both devils." Right? You know, so it's more complicated than either of those things, right? But it's a, you know, I was thinking about the verse from Psalm 23 about, yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And I have a feeling that particularly Tamara and Masha and Herman are going through the valley of the shadow, and they're not through it, right? And Masha never gets through it. And perhaps at the end, Tamara and Herman have gotten through the shadow. I mean, he makes this one decision, which is to not kill himself, right? Near the end of the movie. And I think that is maybe, you know, if you see some hope in that final scene with the two women and the baby, maybe there's actually some hope for Herman too, that he's not there, right? That he's finally actually made a decision, right? And the decision is to live. So, so I think we're just about out of time.
I think that as we look at Holocaust survivors, we realize that they had, you know, PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I think that they didn't talk about it, and going to a psychologist, you know, was not, you know, getting therapy was not as abundant as is now, or, you know, mental health still a taboo, but much more of a taboo then and now. You know, as we look back, I can't even imagine their mental, you know, capacity and stability.
Right. Yeah, it's remarkable that as many of them did what they did, frankly, afterwards, you know, when you think about it. Someone, let's see, Marcia in the chat mentioned that Paul Mazursky directed An Unmarried Woman. He also co-wrote that, I believe. Yeah, I mean, he's made a lot of movies that you have probably seen or at least have heard of. I mean, his first movie as a director was Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. You may remember that one. He made Down and Out in Beverly Hills. He made Harry and Tonto, Moscow on the Hudson, with Robin Williams. With it, the co-star of Moscow on the Hudson is in this movie very briefly. He also made a movie that I love called Next Stop Greenwich Village, which is more autobiographical than probably a lot of his movies, but which had a very young, what's his name? Christopher Walken in it. So, you know, so the all of his movies are worth digging up. They're all interesting. Even the failures are interesting. And there were some failures too. I mean, like Bloom in Love or Alex in Wonderland. I mean, those are lesser known of his films. And like I said, you know, even the odd ones are interesting. Moon Over Parador towards the end of his career.
Oh, yeah.
When he died, he was trying to adapt it into a musical for Broadway after Mel Brooks did The Producers. So Mel Brooks was at his funeral. They were friends. They worked together on some stuff. So next week, a very serious film, The Pawnbroker, another one by Sidney Lumet, starring Rod Steiger. It's a hard one in some ways, a hard one to watch, but it's I think you'll find it very powerful and very meaningful, and certainly worth the time and effort. So I look forward to, and we'll talk about how we can perhaps compare these two a little bit. I mean, both being movies about Holocaust survivors. So.
I just looked. It looks like you can rent it on Amazon Prime for $3.99. And Elaine said Lena Olin is great in the HBO series Hunters, about Nazi hunters. That's a great series with Al Pacino. And please watch your Macomb at Home. Porum's coming up, and we just got so much going on. Take a look, and if you need anything, you can reach out to me. It's great seeing everybody. Stay warm, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vanessa and Rabbi.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.